My friends and I were on our way up north for the weekend for a camping trip we had planned months ago. Camping had never been one of my favorite activities, but I didn't want to be the only one of our group not to go. There were 6 of us in total: Jerry, Mike, Adam, Ashley, Lisa, and myself. We had taken 2 cars up through the mountains. The journey to our destination wasn't bad. It was actually quite enjoyable. As I sat in the back seat listening to my music, I couldn't help but admire the colorful array produced by the autumn season. There was just something about fall that really resonated with me. The color, the activities, the cool weather. This was honestly my favorite time of the year. One by one, the hours slowly started to pass by. The sun was in the early stages of setting when we began to approach our destination. I noticed that the closer we got, the more the leaves started to lose their luster. The once vibrant reds and yellows of the leaves quickly became dull browns. As we pulled off the main road and onto the path leading to the campgrounds, it was like we were traveling through a tunnel. The branches seemed to coalesce overhead, making an almost bramble ceiling. None of us had ever gone camping at this location before. Well, aside from Jerry, that is, who was basically the ringleader of this little excursion. He said he had gone camping up here with his father years ago and had a great time. The rest of us, well, we just wanted to chill, drink, and sit by a fire for the most part. Probably could have done this at home, to be honest. The path before us winded through the trees for a mile or so before it led out into a massive clearing. This area was where the vehicles were supposed to be parked, and the physical campsite was just a bit further inward. Adam groaned upon learning this information. One by one, we exited the vehicles and slowly began to haul our things through the trees and brush to the campsite. After walking for a few minutes, the narrow trail opened up once more to a much greener clearing. This clearing was broken up into 3 sections. Each spot had a fire pit with a few large logs placed around them for sitting. We all decided to just stay at one section since it was large enough to accommodate all our tents. As everyone began setting things up, Adam and I began to walk around looking for some firewood. By the time everyone had finished, we had accumulated enough wood to last us for a while. After dousing the wood with some lighter fluid, I struck a match and tossed it in. We all sat back and watched as the flames spiked high above our heads. A few seconds later, the flames receded a bit and we all started to relax. After some snacks and drinks were passed out, we began chatting and enjoying each other's company. It was rare for us to all be together like this, as we had all been so preoccupied with our own lives over the years. As we sat there, each reminiscing about the past, Jerry just stared into the fire. After a minute, he asked us a strange question. With almost a whisper, he asked us if we believed in ghosts. When he did, he lifted his eyes from the fire to look at each of us. A silence fell around us save for the crackling of the firewood. A moment later, Mike playfully stood up and took Jerry's beer away from him. We all laughed together as that act broke the awkward tension in the air. One by one, our laughter slowly died out, and once we composed ourselves, Jerry nodded to each of us, as if to silently reassert his question. Both of the girls shook their head, as well as Adam. Mike just sat back and folded his arms. When he looked at me, however, I nodded. While I had never seen a ghost before, I was open-minded towards the paranormal. Jerry looked back into the fire and said that this mountain was in fact haunted. The girls laughed, and Adam just rubbed his temples while Mike sipped his beer. I inquired as to how he was so sure about that. He just said that one day in the early 70s, a group of hikers came up to this very mountain. They hiked all day long, and once night fell, they all settled down to sleep. They found the hikers a week later, dead. They were all still in their tents in their makeshift campsite. What was odd about this occurrence was that there appeared to be no physical struggle outside of the tents. no signs of an intruder. And their tents, as a matter of fact, were all still zipped up and intact. There appeared to be no physical markings on the bodies indicating an assault. The only thing that was different, something which they all shared in common, was that their eyes and tongues had been forcibly ripped from their faces. When the medical examiners performed an autopsy on the bodies, it was determined that all the hikers had died from heart attacks before their eyes and tongues were taken. Ever since that day, the people who have come up to this mountain have all reported that they have seen some type of spirit or demon lurking within the trees. When Jerry finished telling his story, I could feel the tension in the air. Everyone kind of just shuffled in their seats as the embers of the fire slowly began to flicker. With a yawn, Jerry stretched before wishing us all a good night. As he stood up to head to his tent, I heard Mike say, "Wait." Jerry stopped in his tracks and we all turned our attention to Mike, who seemed to be staring off into the darkness. He pointed over to one of the other adjacent camp sections and said, "I think someone is sitting on a log over there." Adam and I both audibly sighed at Mike's pitiful attempt to scare us, but as I looked at him, his eyes seemed convincing. I then turned my head to the direction he mentioned and tried to see for myself. As my eyes adjusted, I thought I could see a shape much darker than the surroundings. I stood up from my seat to try and get a better look. As soon as I did that, the shadowy figure dissipated. Jerry walked back over to us and told us that it was just a made-up story to scare us, that nothing was out there and that we were all indeed a bunch of wusses, that we were just seeing things because it was dark. We all seemingly exhaled and relaxed a bit more. After that, mostly everyone headed to their tents for the night. The girls were sharing a tent and Jerry and Mike had bunked up as well, leaving Adam and myself. While the others went to bed, Adam and I stayed up a bit longer drinking. We stoked the fire and chatted while the others slept. About an hour after everyone had fallen asleep, Adam began to nod off in his chair. I poked at the fire, debating if I should call it a night as well. Then, I glanced up towards where I thought I saw that figure. It was back. But it was no longer sitting. It was now standing near the logs in the distance. I rubbed my tired eyes, hoping that would help. But when I dropped my hands from my face and looked again, it was closer now. I tapped Adam on his arm to wake him up, but he didn't move in the slightest. I turned back and it had gotten even closer. I stood up from my chair again. Even in the dark, this thing was quite noticeable. It looked like a thick layer of mist was just floating in one central spot. I wanted to scream for the others to wake up, but my voice only whimpered as I said Adam's name. This figure seemed to glide above the ground towards me. As it drew closer, I could feel an overwhelming sense of danger coming from it. I wanted to run, but my knees were locked in place. I could feel myself starting to become lightheaded. The figure was only a few feet away now. Through the misty exterior, I could see vaguely inside of it. It looked like this thing was a man. At least, that's what I thought it was. It had two bulbous glowing eyes that locked onto mine with an intense stare. Once it was within a few inches of me, a hand protruded out from its body, and it pressed against my chest. A surge of pain immediately spread throughout my entire form. In the dim firelight, I could see black veins trace their way down my arms to my hands. It felt like all of my organs were being squeezed tightly. My heart felt like it was on fire. The creature then brought its eyes a few centimeters away from mine, almost as if they were examining them. The pure fear that I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had felt before in my life. It was as if I was watching my own death happening before my eyes. I was on the verge of passing out when I heard a voice to my right. It was Adam. When he saw me, he shouted loudly, and within a few moments, everyone came rushing out of their tents. The second that happened, whatever that thing was had faded from view. The black veins on my arms retreated, and I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. Adam and Mike both helped me up, but I was barely able to stand. They asked me what had happened, but I just told them that I wanted to leave. They all shared concerned looks with one another before agreeing to cut our trip short. The entire drive back, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched from a distance. With each passing tree, it seemed like there were eyes following me from behind it. I eventually told everyone in our group what happened numerous times, but of course they didn't believe me. When I told them to ask Adam, he just said that he just saw me standing there like a statue. Afterwards, I asked Jerry about the story he told, and he just shrugged me off. He said it was just some scary kid story that his dad told him, an urban legend about the mountains, and he thought it would be funny to scare us with it. There are many things in this world that I don't know about. Ghosts and demons are definitely among them. But what I do know is that there is something evil in those mountains, and I can't help but feel like it's going to find me again and finish what it started.